What a life, what a journey. This man grew up on the West Coast and the East Coast in America's biggest cities. The Peace Corps. How about being in the Bay Area during the Summer of Love and the psychedelic era with the Grateful Dead and Jefferson Airplane and the start of Hendrix and Bill Graham's Fillmore and Winterland? And then, how about being a war photographer in one of those bubble helicopters hanging out the side? Yeah. Today, you're going to meet John McCay at our Cogir community on Napa Road in beautiful Napa Valley. Hi, John.
Hiya.
Well, all I know is that I just talked to one of your fellow residents at Cogir, Napa Road, and she was drinking a wine, and now you have a mug of beer. I think I want to be there.
You do want to be here. Where are you?
Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, you want to be here.
Is that where you're from, John? Are you from Northern California?
I was born in Seattle, but moved down to the Bay Area after 3 years and moved to Boston, moved to New York 3 years each in those young kid ages, and then back to the Bay Area to North San Francisco, which would be just south of here for 7th grade through college.
So being from the Northwest, Seattle and San Francisco, what put you in the Northeast in Boston and New York?
My father was in management with a insurance corporation. So every 3 years, he was fortunate to be promoted, or you either move and get promoted or find another job, maybe. However, that took us to the head offices the head office is in San Francisco, but running the office in New York, and then running the Boston office, and then back to San Francisco. So,
John, what was that like as a kid? Was it fun bouncing around, or was it tough because you had to make new friends everywhere and new schools?
Each time, but each time became more understandable. However, by the hitting Boston, my mother had come down with severe cancer. And so from grade school on until I entered college, she was battling cancer. So very difficult for my father. He's climbing the proverbial ladder. He has 3 sons. He has a terrific wife who is dying of cancer. And so the family dynamics get very intense.
So you have 2 brothers, and
Yes.
were you raised close?
Very close. Love my brothers. One was working with the Clinton administration and FEMA, and he had a heart attack and he passed away. So that he died at 50. My younger brother is still alive. He's a rock and roll and jazz musician in Muscle Shoals, Alabama.
Wow.
And he's married to a legendary singer herself in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So
Who is
they
that?
have a family of musicians.
Who is the member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that he's married to?
Donna Jean recorded with lots of people, but Percy Sledge, When a Man Loves a Woman,
Of course.
Elvis Presley and his comeback and his In the Ghetto and Suspicious Minds, and then she joined the Grateful Dead out here in California, and she was in the Dead for through the 70s. And my brother was a bass player out here, and so her husband died, as do all the piano players in the Grateful Dead. And so she married my brother, and then they moved to Alabama, which is if you ever get a chance to watch a Netflix program called Muscle Shoals, it'll show you really the home of lots of legendary rhythm and blues, Aretha Franklin, Allman Brothers, Leonard Skinner, et cetera, et cetera. Bob Dylan, Rolling Stones, they all recorded in Muscle Shoals.
Boy, during that era too, with
Yeah,
all of those artists, the Grateful Dead in the 60s and 70s in the Bay
yeah.
Area. Oh my goodness.
I
And
used, I used to do light shows with them when I was in college. I learned about the light shows that Bill Graham was doing in San Francisco
at Winterland.
at Winterland, exactly in the Fillmore. And I called Bill Graham up and I go, I'm nobody, but my friends have told me what you're doing and I want to learn. So he said, come on over. I met him at 2 o'clock at entrance of Winterland. And he met me and brought me in and explained how to put a show on and took me up to the light show director who does all the liquid art. And that's what I'm an artist and I'm interested in that part. So I came back that evening and they showed me the full production. And I started my own company up in the Puget Sound area.
John, did you realize during that time, because you're talking legendary
65, 66.
venues, we're talking, I mean, the Grateful Dead, but the whole
Yeah.
psychedelic era, Winterland, Bill Graham, those days, the early Jefferson Starship,
Right.
Hendrix, Arlo Guthrie, the folk singers, everything happening on the San Francisco scene. You were right in the middle of it. Did you realize it at that time that you were
Yes.
in the thick of something special?
Yes. But it was no big deal. It was our people doing that stuff. My brother was making music. Uh, I had adult parents who were lawyers to Grateful Dead, and they were ACLU lawyers. When the docks were rioting, they were
Yep.
part of working with Harry Bridges and the Longshore Union. So these were real activists in the 30s and the 40s and raising us. So it didn't mean my father was out there as a union, but because he was in corporation, but other parents in Marin County were part of that.
Unbelievable era.
And there was Alan Watts, who was talking about Zen Buddhism. He was living with Jean Varda, who was a painter, friend of mine, but also a friend of Picasso and George Braque. And so we had this beatnik and more ancient society around us. There were, all I can say is yes, in San Francisco, you're right in it.
Oh, and that era too, seeing so many of the ships, and not just the cargo ships, but the warships
Right.
coming in and out of the Bay Area underneath the Golden Gate Bridge, and Sausalito, of course, right there. That had to be a fascinating time. And you were a war photographer, correct?
I was a photographer during the Vietnam War. I was in Korea. I was very much a war photographer, but I was in Korea. So what I did was, there were a lot of neat, interesting jobs, but it was not under fierce combat. I was in Korea during the Vietnam era.
Right, but the overall environment was so explosive, you had to see some unbelievable,
I did.
interesting fall over in Korea.
I filmed the DMZ and little bubble helicopters. And anytime there were troop movements, that film would just go right to the Pentagon.
The bubble
So
helicopters, the ones that didn't have the doors on them.
they didn't have doors on them. Some had doors on them.
So you were leaning out as a photographer?
Yes.
Oh, John, come on.
I'd say, "Where's my parachute?" And they'd say, "I'm sorry, Mac, we're flying too low. You don't get a parachute."
Do you ever get used to something like that? Did you get shot at?
When we got shot at, I was the one who told the pilot, the officer pilot, "Let's get the hell out of here."
Whew.
Yes, but it was not common.
You see, John, I would have told the pilot, let's get the hell out of here before you even took off.
Well, it was my job. I spent a lot of time up on the DMZ, up at Panmunjom, because when I first got to Korea, um, well, there were two different occasions, but while I was there, the spy ship Pueblo was captured, and there were 100 soldiers on that spy ship, our ship Pueblo, captured by the North Koreans. So one of my assignments was to go up to Panmunjom on the border and film the negotiations between the Red Chinese, the North Koreans, and the United Nations commanding general, who was a 4-star general named General Bonestill.
Boy, that was a powder keg waiting to happen, wasn't it?
Probably today is a bigger powder keg, frankly.
And when John, for our viewers, when John mentions the DMZ, that's the military zone that had to be unbelievable to be flying over. Was some of the subject that you had to shoot being a war photographer, do you ever get used to that, John? Do you ever become accustomed to that?
Frankly, I was good at it.
Never stuck with you, never bothered you, never got in your head?
No. But I was very fortunate. I mean, don't get me wrong at all. I was very fortunate. I mean, I was there when Bob Hope and Beautiful Ladies would come, and I'd be given the front row to film, and my officers in charge would just ask for whatever I can capture on film. They won. So
that was pretty nice. You had Anne Margaret and Mitzi Gaynor, and
I had Anne Margaret. You're absolutely right. Gold Star, the Gold Diggers from Dean Martin show.
Those were pretty good days for sure. John, tell us about living at Cogir, Napa Road, Napa Valley.
I've lived in Sonoma for 50 plus years, married, and recently my wife passed away, and I got pretty sick on my own and moved to a hospital. And my daughter found this as what she considered to be the best option for me leaving the hospital. And I just stepped right into it.
You've made friends. Do you enjoy living in the Cogir community?
Yeah, I mean, my very first day, I was saying goodbye to someone who brought me here, and they were having a Zumba class, Zumba downstairs. And I just go, "Okay, see you later." And I just joined the class. And it's been that way ever since. I have been fortunate to be able to take advantage of a lot of the activities here. And I appreciate that immensely. And that's been part of my resurrection. Part of me, from surgeries, I have a number of, I will call them disabilities. So I need a lot of work to get over those. Everything is internal. So I look too good here. I'm sure people go, "What are you doing here?" But I just have to ride that out. And we have a gymnasium, and I'm able to do some exercises there. We have an art craft room, and I love to do art. And so I like to be down in that room and encourage others to jump in. And they do. So it's fun to play a couple of roles. I just left a bridge game. So I like to play bridge as often as possible. And it's, all these activities just blend in beautifully to keep your mind working. And so I'm very happy.
And you're also great for the community, John, because you have so many wonderful stories. I mean, from growing up on the West Coast and the East Coast in America's biggest cities to being in the city of love during the psychedelic era
Yes.
and working at Winterland and Fillmore with Bill Graham, seeing that whole era, and then being a war photographer in one of those bubble helicopters. You're an interesting guy, John. You've had an interesting life, and I'm glad that you're still enjoying it.
Thank you.
My pleasure, John. Thank you. Terrific. Really enjoyed it.